Good evening. Today we have assembled at the Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs to lend our ears to Dr. Sebastian Joseph, who has been very gracious to accept our invitation. He has come down all the way from Kerala, and the subject of his talk would be Therapeutics of History and the Art of Everyday Life. I must say the subject itself has piqued our interest immensely. At the outset, I extend a very warm welcome to him on behalf of the Institute and on behalf of all our listeners. Dr. Sebastian Joseph has been kind enough to grace our institute in the past as well. This is his third visit, and we look forward to interact with him more frequently in the future as well. A brief introduction of his many splendored personality. Dr. Sebastian Joseph is an academician who specializes in the areas of environmental history, technology and environment, oral history, film history, and so on. As is evident, his mainstay is in the area of history. He wrote a dissertation on the subject of change and continuity in the forest policy of Cochin, for which he was awarded the Doctor of Philosophy PhD degree, and he evolved the same subject into a book as well, Cochin Forests and the British Techno-Ecological Imperialism in India. And during his Master of Arts tenure, he had the singular distinction of securing 3 gold medals for his chosen subject. So we are very glad that a person of his distinction is among us, and he has contributed to various academic journals and has edited several volumes. And among his major publications are Ecological Imperialism and the Tribals of India, Silent Valley and the Resilient Debate, and so on. He was elected as the General Secretary of the Kerala History of Congress in the year 2020, and he has presented papers at various national and international conferences, and among his edited works include Environmental History Issues in Prudence and Profligacy, which are the proceedings journal of the UGC National Seminar for the year 2008. He has had a vast and checkered teaching experience, mainly in the Union Christian College in the Ernakulam district in Kerala. He worked there as an assistant professor, associate professor, and so on. He was the recipient of Charles Wallace India Trust Research Grant for an academic visit to the United Kingdom in the year 2013, and he earned or secured the minor research fellowship for a project as part of the University Grants Commission, and he has guided more than 5 PhD scholars and has contributed to the academic narrative of history in more ways than one. It gives us great pleasure to invite you once again, sir, and I request you to please begin.
So good evening to all of you. Most respected elder friends who are sitting here. Sri Ramu, Secretary of JIPA. Sri Shashi Kiran, who is just introduced to me as a person with, potential creativity both in language and technology. And I must be grateful to Dr. Sivichanagya Matthew IARS for the recommendation for me to come as a speaker to JIPA, one of the finest administrator turned academician turned administrator and a public intellectual with whom you have constant affiliation. So the topic which I am talking to you is actually, the title may be a little embarrassing or maybe a technically oriented title, Therapeutics of History and the Art of Everyday Life. Because, as all of you know, history is usually considered as a subject which is not that useful, or which is not having any practical value in that sense. When I went to join, the pre-university or the pre-degree course, I don't know in what way it is known in Karnataka. In Kerala, it is the pre-degree. For the 2 year, the present plus 2, 2-year course for a group which is third group. First group, second group. First group is math, second is science, and the third is history. So it is like people sitting in the third class, the Gandhi class, the poor people, So I went to join for third group at my father's college. And the principal insisted me that you should join for the first or second group, which you have scored very good marks for the SSLC. For the 10th standard, I got high first class. So immediately I said, no, I want to join for history. Then the principal asked, why you should join for history? I said, I have a passion for history and I like history and I will join only for history. And this incident happened just in front of my father, who was a professor there. And he kept silence because it was me to respond to the principal's comment. So usually this is a kind of which I can call as something like a nonsensical kind of comment, or in some sense a dehumanizing comment in that sense, because you consider history as a subject that deals with the past, So what is the relevance for the past for today? Many people are thinking like this. I had certain instances or certain experiences in my life, which changed my attitude towards history. So through this lecture, I'll be trying to explain such experiences I had with the subject. I'm not going to talk to anything about theory or profound scholars' comments about history, nothing like that. But my own encounter with history, the discipline, and why I have come to such an understanding, a conviction that within history, inside history, embedded is a therapeutic capacity. Therapeutic capacity, in common parlance, it is called the healing capacity. While medical sciences heal your body, I will argue that history heals your heart, your mind, and your intellect. Thank you, sir. And while medical sciences consider your body as a site of the disease, history considers your body as a composite site of emotions, sensibilities, emotions like love, hatred, agony, disillusionment, many things like that. So if you want to understand a human being in its totality, if you want to understand the person sitting next to you, I repeat this, the person sitting next to you in a bus or in a train, you should understand history. Because your understanding of history will enable you in reformulating or reconfiguring your attitude towards that person, to whichever country he belongs, to whichever nation he belongs, to whichever community he belongs, to whatever language he speaks, or whatever community he is affiliated with. No medicine can help you in that. There are no tablets for, generating the idea of secularism or love for humanity. It has to be internally cultivated. So in that sense, over the years, I have understood that there is a great healing capacity of history, which I will definitely explain to you three experiences I had in my life. The first experience is the COVID time. You know about the COVID times. The lockdown was on March 23rd, 2020, but it erupted in December 2019 in Wuhan, in Cochin. but actually we felt the rigor or the pain or the fear of COVID since March 23rd, 2020, when you were shut up in this world, cubicalized in this world. So I was living with my wife and daughter at my home, three in a house. My son, he was away. At that time, he was studying outside. So all the three were there. So we got enough opportunity to look at faces, to talk to each other. There was a time when, I used to call my wife, who is sitting in the downstairs over the phone. But now enough time is there, My wife is just in front of me. My child is there with me. We used to watch films. We used to watch and observe the surroundings, the environment. And we felt the pain of isolationism. I think all of you felt the pain of isolationism, being alone at house. So it was a splendid opportunity for me to understand the history of pandemics. As a teacher, I had taught so many classes. I had engaged in so many classes on pandemics, for example, on plague, on malaria, on Spanish flu, any kind of pandemic, and especially you have studied about the Black Death in the 13th, 14th centuries. You have studied about the Justinian plague, and so many histories are there written, There are references about the dance of death, the death used to dance with people. All such things we had gone through, and read the greatest novel of Albert Camus by name Plague. So all these things I had. But I never experienced a pandemic on my body. So when I started experiencing pandemic, when I started sensing the odor of the pandemics, the sanitizer, earlier before the COVID times when you used to smell, Dettol or something like the spirit which is used in medical colleges and hospitals, we used to say that, oh, infection is there, don't go there, But people were, thronging for or liking to smell sanitizers because sanitizers gives you confidence that this area is free from disease. We used to look at people wearing masks with some sense of suspicion, before the COVID times. But mask became a very positive signal, simple, during the COVID time. I, as a researcher, my specialization is in environmental history. And oral history, memory and history, now film history also. But as a researcher and as a writer, I used to sit long hours in the archives. Archives is a place where the old records are stored. All the old documents are stored. And I used to go through all these documents. And I found, before the pandemic, I found that, whenever a document on the pandemic comes on my way, I will not take that. Because my problem is environmental history and memory history. Whatever document is coming to me related to that problem, I will engage with. And other documents, I have no concern for that. Now in 2028, March onwards, I started thinking, how many documents had come to my table on pandemics, on Spanish flu. About 12 lakh people died in India alone during the pandemic, during the colonial times. How many people died because of plague? How many illustrious writers were born during the plague? Because I don't know whether you are knowing about the fact that, even Newton, came out with his finest discovery and observation during a pandemic time. Rousseau wrote the general contract, the idea about the general contract during a plague shutdown. So they had given enough, they had had enough opportunity. But it's for the first time I got an opportunity to sense the chemistry of history in some sense. In the archives, I started feeling the order of the pandemics, by the order, every age have an order, O-D-O-U-R, order, smell, all of you know that, smell. Many senior citizens are sitting here. Can you say that the order of Karnataka or Bengaluru of 1960 is the order today? The smell has differed, If you go through the street, the MG Road or the Koramangala, the busiest of the streets, now you feel a different order is there. The historians started studying about the orders because of the impact of the pandemic. I taught in a postgraduate research institution in Kerala, UC College. Our department was in the third floor, and in the ground floor it was the chemistry department. And the chemistry teachers and science teachers will say that history is, it's about the past. You have nothing to say about the present, and you have no future because you are not saying anything about the present. Then once, I asked the head of the department of chemistry, my dear friend, you are saying that history has no value. Okay, I agreed, history has no value. Why history has no value? There is no change in history, You are saying the same thing. Who built that? How many people were killed during the Second World War? Anyway, the number is not going to change. So what is the use of that? A historian said, if they say that 250 people killed in a rebellion, the same 250 will be there after 50 years also. Except if some people distort that history, it will be 250 only. Then what is the use of studying history? Then I commented, I responded, sir, for the past 25 years, I am teaching history in the third floor. And every time, I smell the odor that is coming from the chemistry department as the same. You are doing an experiment in the chemistry department, and the same odor is coming, and you are saying that chemistry is changing. So what is the change in chemistry? More than that change, society is changing. Have you got any disagreement with me? The chemistry of the society is changing every day. Because the present society is not modern, it is not post-modern. If you go by the words of a great Polish sociologist, the present society where we live is a society which is called the liquid modern society. You know what is the characteristic of the liquid? It will enter into any form immediately once it is poured into a plane surface, It will have no structures. It may go there, here, according to the plane, the shape of the table, things like that. So ever-changing society. In an ever-changing society, a subject that, attempt to know the reasons for the change, the causes for the change is history. It is not chemistry, it is not physics, it is not commerce. And about the commerce teachers also, I had some disagreement with them. They used to argue with me. Then I asked, you have a subject called bookkeeping and accountancy. How did the subject evolve? It evolved because of the history of capitalism. Because the feudal lords were not, they were not wanting for exact mathematics, accounting. Suppose a feudal lord is having a great property, he will not count the number of coconuts. The manager or the supervisor will say that there are 2,600 coconuts. He will agree that. That is feudalism. Because there is nobody to challenge him. But a capitalist will be, should be conversant with the facts. How many coconuts are there? Why there is a fall in the production? What is the rate of one coconut? So because of that, bookkeeping and accountancy emerged. So your subject too is having a history in that sense. So every subject is having a history, every system is having a history, every individual is having a history. So understanding the system, the concept, the individual is essential for understanding the science of human civilization. This is my argument. Someone of you sitting in this hall might have read a wonderful history book written by an Israeli historian, Yuval Noah Harari. Otherwise, you should read that. Because the very next, you have read that. Yes, you have read that, Sapiens. The work is Sapiens. We are all Homo sapiens, sapiens. There he says that human civilization is what today, as human civilization, it is because of the power of the imagination of the human beings. It is not because of science, it is not because of technology, it is not because of any other devices or gadgets. It is because of the senses of the human beings to think. The cognitive capacity. That is why he commented that the greatest revolution is the cognitive revolution. Because in your brain, what is happening in your brain is cogitations. A lot of thought processes are coming up. And how do you condense that? How do you extract that thought process as concepts? and say that this is the ideology that you want to practice, then you become a human being. Otherwise, you are a chimpanzee. Because chimpanzees, they form together, they group together, but they have no idea how to advance. They have no ideology to project. So all the ideologies and ideas created, transmitted, circulated, celebrated, disagreed by the human beings are through the process of this cognitive engagement with the present. So history is not the past. History is about the present. Whatever history you study, whatever history you research, ultimately that history is linked to the present. The grammar of history is present. Because without the present, you cannot understand the past. You are living in 21st century, and you cannot go to the 19th century, live there, and understand the past. You understand the past sitting in the 21st century. You are going back to the 19th, or the 18th, or the 14th century, even to the prehistoric times, and you can create your own history. So, the sensibility of the historian to create a history that is vital for the continuation of human civilization is inextricably, that means it is undoubtedly tied with the present, that is every day. Every day is an occasion for you to understand history. Every day is an occasion for you to ruminate on the past. I will explain this with some of my experiences, engagements with history. One fantastic event happened to me in my life about 10 years back. I was traveling from Trivandrum, capital city of Kerala, to Kottayam, my town. You may be knowing Kottayam. Kottayam is a town which is actually a town which is very famous for rubber plantations in Kottayam. So I was traveling to Kottayam, and it was a AC compartment, I got a single side seat, and I was sitting there alone. And opposite a person came. He was wearing a safari suit and well dressed senior citizen. Then I judged his age as 70 plus. I was 40 or 42 then at that time, and I took a book to read, and I started reading. Every time, whenever I travel, I used to read and write notes. I started reading. Just after 5 or 7 minutes, I just chanced upon to look at his face. I looked at his face, and he was looking at me alone. He's an old man. He's sitting there in front of me, and this fellow is reading the book, not talking to me. Perhaps that is his thinking. Immediately, when I looked at him, he asked me, "Where are you going?" I said, "I am going to Kottayam." "What are you?" I said, "I am a teacher." "Teacher of what?" I said, "Teacher of history." Immediately he responded, "What is the use of history?" Then I decided I should teach him a lesson. Not as a punitive thing, but I should teach him, because my subject is history. Then I closed my book. Anyway, I lost the opportunity to read the book. I closed the book. I started talking to him. I asked him, "Sir, after 100 years, then I said, you may be 72 or 73. Then he said immediately, "I am 81. Such a fantastic, He was looking younger than me even at that time. And he said, "Yes, you are teaching history?" "Yes, I am teaching history." "Then tell me about the value of history." "I also studied history." Then I said, "Sir, after 200 years, where will your history be recorded?" "Your history will be in two statements, two data, two documents. One is your birth certificate and the other is your death certificate. Nobody is going to write your history. You have enough wealth." He's a very rich man. Later on, we exchanged, so many ideas. I came to know about his status. He was an engineering graduate, a very long time from IIT. And he had a business firm in Cochin, a great man, towering personality. And then he started narrating his life to me. One by one. And then he said, "My first memory is an elephant bathing in a river, and the mahout and the elephant coming, emerging from the river is my first memory, which is something like a fossilized relic in my mind." Then so many such memories were, narrated by him. And then I was cautiously listening to him. Then he started narrating, very intimate histories also. Then to much of my shock, I was totally embarrassed and shocked to hear this testimony from him. He was talking to me for the first time. He said that at the age of 50, I had an extramarital affair. Oh my God, I wanted. That was actually a very shocking experience for me. And then he told about that, and then he told about, that woman was murdered after 2 years, and I was actually caught up in the vortex of fear, whether the police will come and arrest me. I have no connection with that even then. But he got highly confused. Anyway, nothing happened. He started loving his wife more after the death of that woman, and continued with that. And what happened towards the end is that he came to the railway station, Kottayam, up to the door of the train, and embraced me, and he cried and told me that for the first time, I was forced to look into my past. Had I neglected his question, saying that I would have neglected him, saying that, sir, I have to read, I have to prepare for a lecture, things like that, then I would have missed an opportunity to listen to that person. And what happened is that a series of lectures were given by me actually based on his recommendation, this person's recommendation. And he even agreed me that you can definitely publicly announce my name and you can narrate the story. I said, no, that is ethically incorrect. I will not do that. So this is the bonding between a data, supposedly a data, and this person, after 50 years or 100 years, will be simply a statistical data for the government. A person like that lived. So actually, this is actually a defrosting of a data that happened. A person sitting next to me is a data. Historically, he is a data. Because he is very old. He is 82 years old. And he started narrating the entire history to me, the past to me. And the data was actually defrosted during that particular time. And I started loving him. I started respecting him. He started respecting me. And then as a group, we started collaborating and organizing seminars, workshops, aiming at the promulgation or propagation of memory and history and oral history, things like that. So this is actually a life world, every life world, every episode in a life world is a field for the historian and also for you people also. You can also go to a historian, you can share your concerns, you can go to a university professor if they have an oral historian. You can narrate your story, you can narrate your history and get recorded in history. I will tell you about the results of that later after some time. Then like this is actually an individual engagement, something like a cinematic coincidence that happened while I was traveling. But during my research project, I interviewed so many Adivasis in Kerala. Adivasis means tribals living in abject poor conditions. There is a group of tribals in a district in Kerala, Idukki, where Munnar is coming, Mannans. Mannans, a primordial aboriginal community of Kerala. I went to interview a Mannan, a person. He was aged 91 at that point of time. When I went there, he was reluctant to talk to me in that sense because he was afraid of me, what this person is going to write about me, about our activities, things like that. Then in the due course, after 1 week, there was, a cordial relationship, a friendly relationship between me and the Mannan. He started narrating to me so much of histories. He talked about deforestation in the area. He talked about the migration of the community to Idukki. And then he also talked about some of the relationship he had with the forest officials, and many of the forest officials talking to him and advising him to colonize some land because the migrants are coming from the downhill. He said, why should I colonize land in the forest? Forest is for everyone. Then I also interviewed a peasant, a very poor peasant. He narrated the entire story of migration, his encounter with wild animals, and abject poverty that he was facing in the downhill, that is in the plains. That is why he came to this hilly region. And ultimately he narrated to me that, now looking at these lands, changes in the landscape, which led to so much of deforestation, dehabitation of animals. I am pained by this sight, he said, the poor person. Then I interviewed a rich person, a rich peasant. All these people were above 90. That is the most important part of the story. But they had excellent memory about these things. Because the long-term memory, it will not fade in that sense. Because we may forget what happened yesterday. But we will be having a very vivid memory about, a thing that had happened about 20, 30 or 50 years before. So this person was talking to me. The first sentence, after introducing himself, he said that I am the first migrant to this area. And I got into the forest after pushing the elephants. That was his comment. So, triggering the masculinity, his vigor and rigor in changing a landscape on his own, So, I studied these three individuals, the tribal, then the poor peasant, and then again the rich peasant migrant. I came to understand the emotional differences among these people, how people were looking at their spaces. And the Mannan was an ignorant person. He was not knowing about forestry. He was not knowing about the bad effects of deforestation, things like that. But he was talking about, forest as his own home, the mentality. And the first migrant, there is a rich man. He was talking something from the point of view of as a conqueror of the earth, was pushing the elephants and, amassing much wealth and donating much land for charity purposes, things like that. And the poor peasant was ruminating on what happened as, deforestation and all the resultant, shortage of water and all such things as the evil effects of migration. He is himself examining himself in a retrospective manner. So this is a strength of history. Now I will tell you about why it happened to be something like a therapeutic engagement. All the three persons in their immediate conversation, intimate conversations, narrated their stories of pain, agony, displacement, fear of animals, fear of a foreign land, that means, the forest, things like that. And they told me that this is for the first time that their histories are recorded. Had I missed these people, the testimonies of these people, had I missed them, these people, what would have happened? Definitely, all the three persons will be there in the data archives of the government as numbers only. 50 people migrated. There were about 256 Adivasis there living. About 456 poor peasants from the low-lying area migrated, all in numbers. So where will we get the emotions from these numbers? It is very difficult to get the emotions from the numbers. So history is giving an opportunity for you to talk to your neighbors, talk to your people belonging to your society in the present and gather information which will definitely build a relationship, a solid relationship with them. The coherence of the society, the bonding of the society. I am forgetting as a historian, I am becoming one with the Mannan, one with the peasant migrant, one with the rich peasant also. What happens there ultimately? Engaging with their histories is not just a matter of academics. It is a matter of building relations. It is a matter of building new social relations that will ultimately lead to a process which is called progressive humanization. Progressive humanization. So the ultimate agenda of historical sciences and studies is progressive humanization. If you are remaining as a scholar, as a historian, always working in the archives and not getting involved with the people in the society, then what is the use of your history? About 200 or 250 people will read your book, which is considered to be the number one book internationally or nationally or regionally. So that will be of no use for the society. So a historian's critical engagement with the everyday life is very important. Our archives, for you also, there is an archives at your home, next to your bed, next to your room, there is an archives. There are grandparents living in your homes. You yourself can record your histories. You yourself can narrate your history to your grandchildren. So your home itself is becoming an archives in that sense. I will narrate one more real life story from my experiment. My mother was a teacher. She died in 2022. She was a cancer patient while I was studying in the 9th standard. So at that time, I had no that much of, knowledge about cancer. I thought that this is a disease, something like fever. So she will recover like that. But she had her pains. She was very tense. She was having the agony. She was facing death, things like that. But she recovered anyway. Thanks to God, she recovered from her illness. And finally, about 6 years before her death, one day she developed certain symptoms of the same disease, and she was examined. I was sitting in the hospital, the cancer hospital, and that was a great occasion for me to understand the pain of cancer and the agony of death in history. So many patients were, in the veranda. One of the finest oncologists is there, world famous, internationally acclaimed oncologist is there. So everyone is there to see him. So I looked at the faces of these people, and all their faces, witnessed an emotion like the mentality of the 100. Mentality of the 100, So what is going to happen tomorrow? Both the patient and the relatives are sitting like that. I looked at my mother. She was also having much tension. And then I can read her face, the fear that is there on her face. Then ultimately, she was diagnosed and there was no problem with her. We went back, returned to home, and then I asked my mother, show me your records, the cancer treatment records. My mother's subject was chemistry. My father's subject was history. So being a chemistry teacher, she was also obsessively engaged with history in those times. Because father used to narrate the history, biographies and autobiographies of people, things like that. So she had a brilliant documentation. She had all the records with her. I went through the records one by one. In those times, that is in the 1979 and 80, the time when she was first diagnosed with cancer. At that time, the chemotherapy was not there. It was a radiation. So I saw certain medical reports in which, her body was diagrammatically represented with spots where this radiation is to be given, things like that. I went through all the records one by one. It's absolutely fantastic records with her. But even then, I was not knowing my mother. She was sitting next to me. In the next room she was sitting while I was going through these documents. And then I started recording the testimony of my mother. I started interviewing her. It lasted for about 2 years. And 14 diaries, I used to write whatever she say. And my daughter used to record. Some of the testimonies were recorded. And these diaries are there intact with me as her memories. This is not a question about, recording one's memory, my mother's memory. This is not about my mother's memory. Then I, came to know about certain oncologists and certain cancer patients of those times, and I interviewed them. My mother was a teacher, so I interviewed mainly people belonging to that class, just to understand the commonality, the common feelings. All of them had the fear of death in those times, the fear of death. Tell me, from which document can you understand about this fear? Are there any documents which talk directly about the fear of my mother? Be the oncologist, reports, the treatment records, or the diagnostic reports, or even the radiation files which have my mother's body dissected and, the particular part is shown? No. When I started talking to her, she had a great relief, because anyway, my son is sitting with me and talking to me for a long time. Earlier, she used to invite me, calling by my name, come on, we will have a discussion. I will say that, I have something to work, I have some papers to be presented, I am on a research, things like that. But I sat with her for about 2 years, and then only actually I discovered my mother. hearing about her history. A person sitting next to you as your mother or father is far away from you. And the therapeutics, what is that therapeutics? From the time of that interview and, until her death, I was intimately attached to my mother on a very different plane. I understood my mother. I understood the emotions of my mother. I started respecting her more. I started devoting more time for her. Can a subject like chemistry or physics do this? It cannot do. So my mother become historically visible for me. I used to lecture, my postgraduate students. I used to tell them that I discovered my mother only recently, thanks to talking to her. So I told you 3 instances when everyday life is becoming an archive for a historian. So history is not away from you, history is with you in the present. A great historian of France who had written a number of books, is a very different historian. He used to write about diseases. One of his work is Madness and Civilization. Other work is Birth of the Clinic, about how the clinic emerged, the modern clinic emerged. Michel Foucault. He commented once that every history is presentist. If the history of the past is not connected to the present, that history is null and void. It should have some value in that sense. So the value of empathy, sympathy, consideration, cooperation, association, creative companionship, everything, all these values are there embedded in the pages of history in very different forms. It has its own patterns, very rhythmic patterns, sometimes irregularly structured patterns. The historian is trying to find out all these patterns as usual historians they do. See, for French Revolution, there are 12 causes for French Revolution. And other historian will also come, 12 causes are there. How many results? 8 results are there. Something like the chemistry, something like the mathematics, But it is not like that. Beneath that French Revolution lies a history of emotions, of the people who wanted change. It is the emotion of the people who wanted change that made the revolution possible. It is the emotion of the women of France who went on to the Versailles Palace and confronted with the queen and demanded reforms, confronted with the king and demanded reforms, that made changes in the society. It is the interactions they had among themselves on the streets, in their houses, that made things change. So everyday life is having an impact, great impact on revolution, great reforms, great administrative measures. So every history is intrinsically, inextricably interlinked with the present of their times. If you miss the present of their times, the past, then you miss the history. That is why I started my talk saying that I could not go to the 19th century, but I should be able to understand the 19th century in all its emotive heuristics living in the 21st century. Only then you will be able to progressively humanize yourself. There is a great comment by Karl Marx. So, all of you know about Karl Marx. Mostly we have read about Karl Marx, about economics of class struggle, production, appropriation, things like that. But Karl Marx once remarked in an essay, this is the most important comment. I have studied about Karl Marx. I read about this particular comment only about 6 or 7 months back. He said, at what point of time an eye become a human eye? Your eyes. You have eyes. If your eyes serve the purpose of a gadget, something like a lens or a camera inside a mobile phone, then it is not a human eye. A human eye of a person gets matured. An eye that is matured and an eye that is understandable sympathetic and empathetic towards the conditions of other people, become a human I. So history is a discipline that, humanize the I in that sense. I'm adding to what Karl Marx said. History is a discipline that humanize the I through not a casual explanation, through a scientific understanding of the past and its bundle of emotions. History is not just a subject to narrate things like that. It is a subject to introspect. It is a subject to examine yourself in the light of the past. Where do you stand as a human being? In India, where do you stand as a human being? Are you a Democrat? Are you a person who love other people? Are you a person with all senses of orthodox sectarianism? Are you a person obsessively engaged with caste? Are you a person obsessively engaged with class? So history is actually a discipline which encourages you to introspect yourself, make a dissection of your personality, cut your personality into pieces, and understand where do you stand as a human being. That is why I said the end result of history is the progressive humanization. The progressive humanization only lead to a finer living of the humans on the earth. This is not concerning with people only. This is not concerning with humans only. It is in the case of rivers. It is in the case of mountains. It is in the case of deserts. It is in the case of animals. Don't think that history is actually human-centric. History has to go beyond the human sensibility to understand the nature also. How do you understand that? While I engage with environmental history, I used to understand what sort of extractions we make. How do we extract from the nature? Like Caroline Merchant once commented about Francis Bacon, who commented in the 16th century that you should be able to cultivate roses in the deserts. That means every piece of land on earth is to be made useful. Everything has a use value. Ultimately, we reached a stage when, you can extract everything. An 8th standard student is going to the school in the morning, coming back in the evening, finds that there is that small hill just by the side of her home is not there. Because this particular age is characterized by two sensibilities. One is a sensibility of environment. We know that, we need to conserve, we need to preserve all this land, we need to conserve forests, things like that. At the same time, you are blessed with a technology which is fast, which is immediate, which is the most sophisticated technology so far the human civilization witnessed to change the landscape in that sense. If you understand that, when you understand that environmentalism itself is actually lagging behind the development, because I used to say about two minds of the 21st century people. One is the environmental mind and the other is the developmental mind. Which mind is getting supreme? If you look at the United Nations 1972 Stockholm Summit, they coined a term in 1972, sustainable development. Even now we are following that. Good, very good. Let us follow sustainable development. But there is a problem with that. Where is ecology? Instead of sustainable development, it should be sustainable ecology. But what is to be sustained? Overall, if you look at the capitalist engagements, it is sustainable development. Development is to be sustained. So ecology is there. You have to respect ecology, but development is to go ahead. The river will vanish, but new malls will come up. In Chandogya Upanishad, it is said that it is the dharma of the river to keep flowing, but you build dams and stop the river for power generation. Okay, of course, you have to build dams, you have to construct new roads, you have to construct big malls. Okay, everything is good, but the thing is that nature is being replaced. The sensibility to understand that replacement A consciousness to understand that replacement is actually cultivated through understanding environmental history. So environmental history, in that sense, it is a therapeutical engagement, not just for the humans, but for the non-human world also. History embraces all such things. It is the most interdisciplinary kind of engagement. And that is there at your home. Old people talk about climate changes, weather conditions, old agrarian practices, everything. So there is a treasure trove. There is an archives of environment even at your home. I used to tell my students to record testimonies related to these kind of nature conservation strategies and mechanisms through stories and through some of the memories of these elderly people, and document that, catalog that. That become a treasure trove for the historians of the tomorrow. History in that sense is futuristic also. If there is no earth, then where are the humans? If there are no oceans, if there are no rivers, if there are no animals, then how humans can survive on earth? Because we live in the most critical times when there is a tendency to consider even the gadgets as the human, because you know about the artificial intelligence now. One of the most orthodox countries in the world, has granted the first citizenship to a robot, Sophia. You know about that. I recently watched a YouTube interview where, robot Sophia is talking to another robot Han. They are engaging in a discussion. So robots are becoming humans, humanization of the gadget. And humans are becoming gadgets, gadgetization of the human. So these two things are happening in the present stage. This is the most critical period. That's why this period is called the most critical period. Recently, an American youth, about 4 years back, went to the court and filed a case that he wanted to marry. The court said, you can marry, but I want to marry my mobile phone. And the case is pending before the federal court in America. But anyway, the American church sanctioned that marriage, and the marriage was held in much celebration. And the bride, that is the mobile phone, was dressed in a bride's dressing and taken to the church, and it was solemnized. But even that case is pending before the court. Why I am saying this? I am citing this point to denote gadgetization of the human and humanization of the gadget. The most precarious moment most perilous moment in human civilization, which some scholars comment as plasticization of the human, I used to call it as the gadgetization of the human. Because in the pandemic times, I saw an advertisement in the Hindu, full page advertisement in the Hindu in 2020, maybe in November or December, that the sanitizers that you use for your body is not good for mobile phones and laptops. There is another sanitizer for mobile phones and laptops, back to me. Sanitizer that you use for your body is not good for the gadget. So which body is superior? So a moment has come when the human body is subjugated to the body of the gadget. We are not feeling that. We should feel that. So at this critical point of time, if you follow the footsteps of some of the most popular historians of recording memories, recording testimonies, sharing memories as a group, I think JIPA can take a lead role in, making, a memory museum of Bengaluru. Inside this as a memory museum. In that sense, people can come and record their memories about Bengaluru every day at JIPA. There is a institution called the Story Corps in America. They travel by a car, and there is a recording station. Anybody can enter into the car and narrate about their histories. Many people. Domestic violence, gender issues, sexual abuse, violence, disasters, separation, divorce, anything. So such memory sharing will definitely promote and give you an opportunity to understand the person sitting next to you. This is my point. Otherwise, that person is an other. What is happening these days is otherization. Otherization means you consider others, as something alien, and you belong to a particular species. So back to humanity. If you want to bring humanity back to humanity, a human centric, a human sensible, sensitivized way of living, emotionally charged living, you can use history and memories as a medicine. There lies the therapeutics of history in everyday life. I will wind up this lecture with one real life story which is narrated by one of the greatest scientists of India, Professor Yashpal, who was the chairman of UGC. He was a great scientist who used to give a lot of lectures in All India Radio. It's about, a person was walking through by the side of a school and he watched a girl standing, a small girl standing in a veranda. And the time was 10:15. Nobody was there other than this girl. He went away. The very next day also he came at the same time and saw the girl standing in the veranda at 10:15. It repeated for 3 days, and on fourth day in the evening, the man who was a folklorist, he followed this girl in the evening, and she was going from the school, talking to the trees, hugging the trees, talking to the birds, and splashing the rivulets, the water, and plucking some leaves from certain plants and storing it, and soothing the tree because she plucked certain plants, leaves, and entered into a hut. All the way she was interacting with the forest. It's actually a tribal school by the side of a forest. And she entered into a hut. And then after 10 minutes, she came out and asked this person, "Why did you follow me?" He said, "You are always seen in the school veranda at 10:15 in the morning. What is the reason for that?" She said, "I have a sick mother. She is having a wound on her leg. So that is why I am plucking these tree leaves and making it into an ointment and applying on my mother's leg. And then I had to cook food for her. Our father deserted us. We are alone. And whatever strength, whatever capacity I use, I reach the home late by 10:05 or 10:10. And always my teacher, keep me outside the classroom in the veranda." This is a real incident happened for a folklorist, which, actually converted as a story by Yashpal. Then finally, this man asked this girl who was studying in a senior secondary class, but very, very small girl, "Who is the teacher?" She replied, "It is the botany teacher." And then towards the end only, Yashpal gives the title to the story. And the story's title is like this: "Who knows botany? Whether the teacher or the student." Because the student knows much about the forest, talks to the birds, hugs the trees, takes out the leaves, plants to prepare an ointment for her mother, but come late. And the teacher is maybe having a doctorate or, MSc first rank or, most illustrious teacher, keep this student outside in the veranda. I used to adapt this story and say that actually it is not the botany teacher, but it is a history teacher who keep the student outside the classroom. If the teacher is concerned, whatever subject we study, whatever histories we understand, if you miss the point of humaneness, humility, and bonding with the humans, no subject is of any use. Thank you so much.
You have given a heroism to the history, sir, to the other subjects comparing.
It is actually, is the question? It is not a heroism to the subject history, sir.
No, you have shown like that.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So it is a positive comment from you. So because usually, I started the talk by saying that history is usually considered as, a useless subject, Don't go for history. Go for engineering, go for mathematics, physics,
Today we attracted by you, sir.
Pardon?
We attracted by you, sir, history.
Thank you, sir.
That has a history,
Yes. Even that has a history. Every subject has got a history.
This is the moment, history for next future for us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
This moment is history for us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
history, there is no history.
Thank you, Dr. Sebastian Joseph, for that most riveting talk. Through this course of 90 minutes, we did not realize how time went by, and we got to experience many facets of the learned speaker as a researcher primarily, I must say, because life experiences spurs different people to action in different ways. And uh, during the pandemic, when you were spurred into thinking and cogitating upon the what it means to you as an historical researcher, and when your own mother was undergoing such trials and tribulations, even then you took that opportunity to develop and gain those insights from history, and that I think is that came through very strongly. And his facet as a teacher as well, to sit down that elderly gentleman in the train and give him a lesson in history, and to tell us, to share those lessons to us in such a captivating manner, the way he developed his thoughts, and not to crowd his ideas into single sentences, and to give such concrete and at the same time very lucid explanations to the experiences of life, I thought was very, very charming, sir. So I thank you on behalf of all our listeners here, and behalf of the Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs as well. And if I may make a submission here, you spoke about the importance of documenting memories. The founder of our institution, Dr. D.V. Gundappa, has penned his series of reminiscences. It is titled Jnapaka Chitrashale in Kannada, termed The Art Gallery of Memories. And it paints a picture of the society gone by and his own contemporaries. And it is invaluable to reconstruct the history of his time. So I think we resonate very strongly with your thoughts, and on that count, once again, I extend our heartfelt thanks to you, and I request you to please accept a small token of our gratitude and respect. One important announcement: we are joined by Dr. Sibichan Matthew, who is the illustrious speaker for tomorrow. He will be talking about a very interesting subject, and it is very kind of him, very candid of him to come here and listen to this lecture as part of the audience. So we thank him specially as well, and invite all of you to please participate in tomorrow's presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah.